So, hello and welcome to Rachnaye and Rachnakar. I want to introduce you to someone who is coming from an MBA degree plus worked as consultant and now doing consultancy plus writing as well. The unique thing about this person is she started or she have touched upon some of the topics which I have personally not seen many people touching upon. Is one with respect to conservation, with respect to environment, with respect to building that community. Some of the books which she has created, such as Kachra Beach, sorry, Kachua Beach, and then Pedru and Big Boom, and then Street of Sunderbaag. So all these books somewhere talks about the community building, the conservations, etc. So without much of a further ado, let me introduce to you guys to Nandita. Welcome Nandita to Rachnaye and Rachnakar.
Hi everyone, and hi Rishabh. Thanks so much for having me here.
Good to have. I mean, meet you. We met once in Neev festival,
Yeah,
and
tag
then.
along.
So what I would like to first understand, and I'm sure people also would like to understand because I have raised the word of MBA and KPMG thing. So how this started? Like when this from an MBA degree to a KPMG consultant to a writer thing, when and how this started?
Yeah, I know it is true that it's a very unusual career path, if I may say so. Um, I mean, just to take you back, yes, I mean, when I studied, it was sort of straight and narrow path for me. I did my BCom, and after that, the options were fairly. I mean, in those days, do you want to do accountancy or management? And I got into XLRI, so for me, it was management. And straight from campus, I got into business consulting, which was perceived as a wonderful thing to happen. So, of course, I sort of rolled along with it as and when all of this happened to me. And I went from one sort of success to another as defined by everyone around me.
Of
you
course,
know
of course.
what success was. And I actually spent, I should tell you, Rishabh, 14 years in consulting. I was first in Andersen and then in KPMG. So I did have a fairly long career. By the end, I was an associate director at KPMG. So I was poised for, even higher so-called success at that time. It gets more and more difficult to leave actually, as this rat race pulls you in,
Of course.
is something I must say. So I reached this point where I'd sort of was doing well at work and projects, deadlines, the usual stresses, multiple travel plans, all of that goes along with that kind of business consulting profile was happening. And that's when the birth of my two children, two other very major events sort of happened. Now they are 10 and almost 13.
Okay.
Saturday she turns 13, so now they're 10 and 13. But 13 years ago, my children were born, and I slowed down a bit. To
Okay.
start off with, I began. I said I'll work from home for a while. So for 2 or 3 years, I tried that. I said I won't do client facing. I tried that. And since I was in this slightly slowed down mode,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think sometimes you have to get off this rat wheel to sort of start assessing and seeing where you are, where you're going. So I began asking questions. Is this what I really want to do?
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of, is this what makes me happy?
Mm-hmm.
Is this what makes me want to sort of get out of bed every Monday and charge into work, and different kind of questions,
Of
different
course.
definitions of success. And uh, because I had young children at that time, what was also happening is I was going back to one very early love of mine, which was always there, which was children's books and reading stories to them. And as they grew up, I began with picture books. And I discovered this whole new world out there of Indian picture books and Indian stories for children,
Mm-hmm.
which perhaps how much ever I read very avidly as a child, we did not have growing up, right? We grew up on Enid Blyton and maybe the odd Ruskin Bond or so, but most of our stories were about blonde-haired girls and boys having picnics, eating food we not
Of course.
even heard of. I was not clear on what is this scone and potted meat sandwich. So, so I was suddenly reading these books that we could relate to, that they could relate to, and I for me it was, wow, I can do this. That was a sort of reaction. And because I was like on this part-time work sort of thing, I had time. So I went back to writing. Writing is something I used to do a lot in school, college, but in the sense of magazines and, into college fests and things like that at that stage. So I went back to writing, sent a few pieces out, and by the grace of God, they got accepted. So I said, let me see how this works, how this develops. Even then, I kind of never thought that it would be what I was doing, to the extent I'm doing now. And today, Rishabh, there's nothing else I'd rather do. I'm not freelancing anymore. I'm a full-time writer
That's
of
good to
children's books.
hear. First time, because
I am
in my earlier discussions, I've asked this
yes.
that why a writer cannot be a writer, and they always go and say, "Oh, I'm this, and I'm a writer as well." I mean, something
I know
which
what you're
hurts.
saying, Rishabh. I should be honest that I am not supporting myself as a full-time writer. It helps that I have a career of consultancy behind me. I think if you want to financially support yourself, this isn't perhaps the line where it is that feasible, which is why you'll hear people saying, I also do theater, I also do advertising, I also dabble in multiple professions. It is difficult for this to be a day job. It helps that I had all those years of working behind me, and therefore I could take that plunge, and I have. But I think falling off that cliff, taking that plunge, had other it had other aspects to it. It's very nervous and scary in many ways. You're used to having that title and security behind you, position, whatever. And many people were saying, "Oh, how lovely that you're doing this." So now, when are you going back to work? And that's so often. And okay. So now I've got a little more used to it. And I think the wonderful thing for me is when my children have grown up now and they go to school and they introduce me to their friends as, my mom's a writer. My mom writes children's books, and I've even done events in their schools. And because there's this Jarrell Award, which children vote for, so now I have some visibility in schools as well. So I think I'm becoming a little more legitimate in their eyes as well. It really helps reflect that way. But that was a bit of a jump, and now it's a complete jump. Since 2020, when my first book was published, I've published 12 books. So that has been quite a whirlwind for me, which is why I was able to also just completely quit work, do this full time. Multiple manuscripts were happening for me at the same time. That's because that's the way I planned it. I said, let me see if this works for me, because I'm getting into it so at such a late stage in life that it's difficult to try something for a couple of years, then go back to something else. So I sent on multiple manuscripts simultaneously. They worked, and I sort of dived into this. So that's a long story of how how the slightly divergent career.
I'll take two takeaways. So one, you are never late to start, which you just now said. And second, if you plan things well and execute on time, nothing can make you fail. That's two takeaways. So those who are listening, take these two takeaways. And if you want to take some more help, do connect with us, or we can help you in more ways with the frameworks, etc., which you can use to plan your things and execute at the time.
I like a thought, or maybe it's even linked to planning, as you say, Risha. Many people say, "Oh, you're so lucky you found the thing that you wanted to do." Even we feel that we're in a rut, or ex-colleagues or whatever. We're doing the same thing for a long time, but we're not sure what it is we want to do. It didn't happen like this overnight. That I had some revelation that this is what I will be good at and what I will work out for me. Those few years when I was at home, I tried out different things. I very actively said, okay, I need to make a change. What is it? I remember I did a bit of theater. I dabbled a bit in theater script writing. I licensed for music. I did a kinder music thing, which is music for children. I worked a bit with an NGO. And I tried writing. I said, let me see and put out some feelers. What is it for me? And one of them clicked. So I think sometimes, you don't, rather than waiting for things to happen to you,
you should try.
Yeah, you never know till you try. You absolutely never know. And this clicked, and now there's no looking back. But that's how it happened. I didn't fall into the lap.
So when we're talking about conservation and all, so why
Yeah.
all of a sudden a book on Dalda 13? So those who don't know who Dalda 13 is, it's a pseudonym for Homai, exactly, who clicked that pic, Homai Warewala, and she was the first photojournalist of India. So again, this talks about two things, which is one, a female initiator who started something on her own for her passion and took a place in the industry and being the first one to do that. So how this idea came into your mind and you started writing about someone? I mean, I'm sure this book, I've read this book. It's like good in terms of illustrations, etc. But why this idea came?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right, Rishabh. That one of the themes that is very close to me is environmental related conservation, and quite a few of my books, in fact, almost all the initial books were built around this theme. But of late, a lot of my books have branched out into. I mean, each topic I take as it comes. I don't sort of bucket myself as an environment writer or writer about strong women or something like that. But I've written a couple now of biographies of very interesting personalities. This, for example, is based on Annapurna Devi's life. The Kachua Beach one is inspired by Afroz Shah. So something I do is I take inspirational real stories and I weave fiction around them. So these books aren't classical non-fiction biographies, but they weave fact and fiction. And at the end, they tell children something about the lives of, these people who are very inspirational for me. This is one such. Absolutely. It had so many of my loves. It had Bombay, not Mumbai, Bombay of the 1930s. So the black and whites and the days when cameras looked like that and were 5 kilos and she strapped it on her back. And it had this absolutely fascinating personality. I think in Mumbai she had one of her last retrospectives, 7-8 years ago. I mean, about a year before I wrote this book. She captured a very interesting part of our history, pre-independence, post-independence. But what interested me more than anything else was really this, the image of this first Indian woman photographer in a complete man's world. I've seen some photographs of, this big congregation of men jostling with their cameras to go in the front. And right there standing is, our Humay Vyarawala, completely at ease, completely at the forefront. And in those days, be it Nehru, Gandhi, foreign dignitaries, she held her own amongst all of them. She took journalism to another level. And it were the values that stood out. This is what I've actually brought out in my book. It's written in a humorous tone. You've read it. So it's a day in her life and bloopers she makes, and each time how she keeps on and persevering to get that perfect photo. But each of these 10 bloopers is based on one particular value that I absolutely admired in her. No nonsense attitude, integrity, perseverance. There's so much about her that was wonderful. And they're all based on real, true incidents that happened to her. I mean, at the height of her career. And that's one of the most amazing part of both these women. They reached the pinnacle of their career, and she put down a camera and stopped at the height of her career because she didn't like what was happening to photography, paparazzi that was coming in and the way photography was changing. She had so much integrity and belief in the pure profession that she stopped at her peak. And this is Kafshi, Annapurna Devi. Didn't believe in performing. She wasn't interested in accolades, awards. The Beatles wanted to hear her and she said, Naima, for me it's the music.
Of course.
I have conversations with God. So both of these women, for them, the performing arts, it's what they did that was so precious, and what drove them. So this is something I loved about these kind of stories, And in today's world, where so much is about achievement, performance awards, we spoke about success, right? So we have different markers of success. So for children to hear stories about women like these who broke glass ceilings, no doubt they were standing on a profession when it wasn't easy for a woman to do so, and yet for them it didn't turn their heads in the least. For them it was about what they were doing, and that was wonderful. Yeah, so that was Homai Vyarawala. And Priya Kurian, who did the illustrations, has done a fabulous job recreating Bombay of those times. And a lot of humor. So it actually become very accessible for children, young children, to also go through these books.
Now you mentioned about illustrations. I would like to have one question, and I really appreciate Priya, Rajiv, and there's one
Yes.
favorite of mine as well. I'll talk about that person as well. So I mean I've seen in most of the cases, at least in the children book nowadays, the picture books, illustrations takes a major part. So as a writer, um, how you interact with such illustrators, and when in the journey of the book creation, who's your favorite? If you can just share all these things with us.
No, that's a great question, and I've learned so much, in the last few years from this whole process. You're absolutely right. I mean, I've done all kinds of books. I've done early chapter books. This one is based in Ladakh. I've done short stories for older children. I've even done a fantasy novel for older children. But my first love remains picture books. And books like Who Picked That Pick, or this Christmas one, which was the last one that I did, in which, words and text interplay with the photos so tightly that both tell the story together.
Of course.
And I think that's absolutely, it's why I got into writing the books. Like I told you, reading Indian children's picture books, which we didn't have much of, and it's a beautiful way of telling stories. And I was quite amazed when I entered and began actually, when my early books got accepted first by publishers, about the process. Because I don't know how many know this, but the way it works is most publishers, work directly with illustrators on the one hand and authors on the other.
Okay.
So that it's a very rare case in which there is actually ongoing interaction. So definitely there will be inputs that you will give your editor. So they'll say, let's say the illustrator has some specific queries. Or if I've done a lot of research, let's say Humayun was a research-based book, right? I've already done a lot on Mumbai in the 1930s, in those days, what photography in those days, Humayun's life itself, all that. Maybe I had a lot of photographs, videos. So I would put it in a file and share it. So that kind of information goes via me to the illustrator. And one fine day, I receive a final PDF with all the illustrations. That's the way it was for so many of my books. Even books like Sunderbaag Street, and so, yeah, absolutely. Very little by way of direct, ongoing interaction. And I think in the beginning, I was a little surprised because I thought, I thought it would be an absolutely page by page ongoing process. But I now understand, having gone through this, that for an illustrator to bring their own vision into the process, to not be overtly influenced by your visual landscape also. They have their words, they have your text, they have clarifications, they'll reach out. But for something as stunning as this to come, I would never have pictured a Zara like this, or a Miss Guppy. She literally created these fantastic characters the way she did. So perhaps I think that works best when we have this separation, and I believe most of the top publishers do work in this way. There was only one or two instances where I was a little more closely involved. In one case, there wasn't an editor, so I worked very closely with the illustrator. And in the other, this was with Katha. So Katha's process was a little different, and I can talk about that book later. But in that book, yes, it was based in a Koliwada in Mumbai, where I'm from. So Varli Koliwada and Kripa, who has done these most gorgeous illustrations. And she works very with the Koli community. She's so familiar with them. But that was a different kind of experience because the editor had a different process. So we planned each spread together, worked through it. So that was a one-off experience. But by and large, they work separately. And one fine day, I'm thoroughly amazed with a beautiful final version that arrives in my inbox. That's how it's been. And I believe internationally also that's how it works.
I mean, it does. Is this done, say, intentionally to speed up the process, or so that the less of iteration happens, or you do not overshadow him or her in their creativity? Is that the reason, or there's
the second part more than anything else. I think the process takes the time it does, and I can talk about the process because it does take a certain. I mean, even after accepting a manuscript, that's when, according to me, the process really begins. But to separate out the, like you said, the influence of the author's vision, visual perception of characters. I mean, I understand a story, a text, a plot, a direction, but I need not dictate what the character should look like and the setting. And I mean, as long as I've given broad directions, I think it's wonderful when illustrators bring a bit of their own into the story and often tell some story of their own as well, which wouldn't happen if you're working too closely. Yeah, I've seen both processes. I think both have their pros and cons.
So how do you pick your book? Like, do you pick like a book on a character or a story goes in your mind and then you start kind of doing your research, or if you are already kind of having that experience from the past, how do you pick the topic or the theme of that story when you start?
Now, as you've seen, my books are on seriously divergent topics by now, from environment books, which are like, this one is set in a mining village in Goa, to just a fun book called Just Like Papa about a girl who wants to be like, I mean, absolutely different books, different themes. I think in my mind, I know that once I start working on a book, especially a research heavy book like the Home My Story, it's going to take me a while, right? It may be 3 months, 6 months, research heavy, even up to a year. And after that, if it's accepted, I start working with publishers for yet another 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, minimum a year, to be honest, in the publishing process itself. So if you're going to live with this, it has to be something that you are personally passionate about. So tomorrow someone says, Nandita, this theme is currently very hot and, everyone's writing about this and write a book will get accepted. For me, that doesn't work. Because if my heart is not in it, then for me to sit and research that and live with it for 2 years and go on back to that story again and again with the kind of rigor that is required, it would be a seriously boring process. So I write about topics I love, something that appeals to me or to me when I was a child, that age. I think I am my first reader. Nandita at 10-11. Would I have picked up this book? Would I have found it interesting? Was there something that's fascinating? And also something I want to learn more about at the same time. Not something I believe I know everything about, because then I get the chance to research, dive into it more deeply. So not hot or current themes, but really this is what drives me. If it's interested me, I just assume that it should interest someone else. And I begin writing. And then when I finish my drafts, my children are my first readers, always. So they'll tell me, okay, does it work for children today?
Now, after illustration or pre-illustration?
Pre-illustration. They're my first readers even before I send it out to any publisher.
Okay. So who is your favorite illustrator that way? I mean, with whom you enjoyed working, or you would aspire to work with that person?
I mean, if you've seen each one of the illustrators I've worked with has done such fabulous jobs. You're asking me the world's toughest question. Each one has brought in a different sensibility. I mean, I've done at least 3 now with Priya Korean. So undoubtedly, if you see the impact her books, I mean, she takes your book to the next level. The impact that her work has on her story, there's no doubt about it. But I'll give you another example. So Pedru and the Big Boom, you talked about this when you were talking of environment books. So it's based in Goa. I'm a Goan and it's based in the village I come from. And my illustrators came back and said, we're going to do the illustrations in black and white. Black and white? Goa's all about the color and the vibrancy and all of that. So I said, how is she going to do this? And they gave this, Niharika Shenoy is my illustrator, and they sent it to her. And she has come back, if you see her work,
of course,
almost got a Mario Miranda-like quality, the cross-hatching, the quality of light and play and shadow. So I think I've learned something different from each and every person really that I've worked with. They've all had their own style. Someone asked me a very interesting question. They said, Junia Donaldson. So she works continuously with 1 or 2 particular illustrators. So they're sort of known together, or, it becomes a jodi that, a look. So is that something that you aspire to? And I said, then you were taking away from me this fun that I've been having of working with totally different people, and all my books coming back with these radically different looks. I love it. I love the variety. So I wouldn't go for that. I've just really enjoyed this process of working with totally different illustrators. Shreya Sen, we worked on Just Like Papa, now we're working together on Just Like Mama. She's got this fun, sweet style. And when I do a lot of events in schools and with children, and when I read her books, they don't let me go to the next page because there's just so much on the page for them to see and ask and inquire, but totally different style, fun and pop-up colors and own style. So I'm learning, and I work with many publishers. Again, I am a rare person who doesn't just go back to one. And as much as that, I go to many illustrators, so I can learn from them. I've said I've come into this a bit late, so I'm just enjoying my time in this sector and learning from everyone.
Would we be seeing any illustration from you also in coming future?
Maybe my private journals, but absolutely not in a published book. Even I know my limitations. I'm very ambitious and believe I can do anything from consulting to writing, but at illustrations, I would draw the line.
I mean, I'm sure AI is coming, so you can try something out. You can just put some text of your mind and let the AI do the job. Try it out.
Say that you could say I could even write my books for me, and there are people who are talking about a world where AI takes over what we're doing, and then you go back to the books I've done and you say, but would AI create a Zara and a Guppy the way Priya Kurian did? And
I doubt. And
yeah,
the reason why
no,
I say that is
yeah,
the Indianness what we have, right? And the nuances, which the minute
yeah,
detail, as you mentioned, the Goan street view, the shade of the light.
yes,
You can go near to the perfect, you cannot be the perfect. While the human mind goes,
this one spread.
exactly.
Uh,
And it's
this is
all in
about
continuation.
Sunderbaag, a whole community coming together to revive and transform a plot of land almost magically. And the way she's captured it in this single spread, there's joy, there's happiness, inclusion. It's brilliant. And she's used mixed media, so there's like real earth standing out, bits and pieces of a jhadu. It's brilliant. And that's brilliant because that's the theme of the book, recycling and using material. And then she has sort of incorporated it into her style. So that's so many levels to the artwork, which AI not there yet. So yeah, so I'll always want to work with some of these who bring in so much storytelling to their art.
Of course. I'll go when you're talking about this emotion and how things are coming up. I'll go a little bit back in the days. Your experience with XLRI,
Uh,
and what memories you have from the city called Jamshedpur, because I also have been there, and there are a couple of my favorites like Fakira's Chanachur.
did you live in Jamshedpur?
For a bit, yes, traveled a lot. I have my close friends from there, so
Right.
that one.
Oh yeah, XLRI. So of course that was camp. Those were campus years. So we're talking over 20 years back. But they were very memorable 2 years. Goes absolutely without saying. And when you go from hustle bustle of Mumbai, and you go to a town like Tatanagar or Jamshedpur, it's a beautiful experience for me. I think for me the experience started right from those train rides to Kolkata, and then spending time in Kolkata, and then of course campus. Because a lot of our time there was of course spent on campus, and those days. But even Jamshedpur itself, absolutely Sakshi Bazaar and Dimna Lake and Jubilee Gardens. I
Of
think that
course.
was what it was, Jubilee Gardens.
Yeah,
We
Jubilee.
had we had this group called Black Sea. All these associations and Excel ended in AXI, Association of XLRI. So Black Sea was Bike Lovers Association, to give you one example. And there were these gang of bike lovers who used to zip along and go on long rides, outside Jamshedpur as well. And I think they adopted me as a sort of bike lover, though non-bike rider. So I was the pillion one always going on. And we did such beautiful rides, that comes back, to the lakes and outside, wonderful roads, waterfalls. So beautiful time, beautiful, happy, friendly place, so much green. I miss a lot about those days, yes.
Of course. Now coming to another happy. I read, I'm not sure, but because I read, you play piano. My question is, after Shahrukh Khan, I'm seeing second person who plays piano. How you are finding time? You're writing, you're consulting, you are working with your kids,
So
family.
I should start by saying my mother is a pianist.
Okay.
She studied classical music in Vienna for 3 years, and she gave concerts, and that's what she did. Even till today, she teaches.
Oh.
She's teaching my kids. So she teaches the piano. So of course, growing up, I think with a mother as a teacher at home, it was absolutely almost a given. So my sister and I, of course, studied piano under her, and we both went up to the level where I'm a licentiate of music. But that sort of was through school, college, and so on. And I think then for me, the fun of music began because in college I was a part of bands and fusion bands, and we were experimenting. I got into jazz, blues. I used to accompany people, do festivals. So I think the love for music has continued because I branched out beyond classical also into so many different ways. And I had friends who would make sure that I come and jam along. And even in XLRI, I was in the band. It was a fabulous memory. And there were a lot of locals who used to come and jam with us in the evenings. And I remember we once even did this concert. So this is the stuff that, memories are really made of. Then for a long time, I'll be honest, KPMG and, too much time playing and all don't go together. So that's when perhaps some of that took a backseat, no doubt. But with the birth of my daughters, among other things, one thing that revived was music. Because I would play to them. It began with that, we were playing and singing. Then I wanted them to learn. So in the beginning, I began teaching them. Now they're learning with my mother. And I began going back to the piano. Again, still not so much. Big trigger, pandemic.
Oh.
Sitting at home, writing, of course, and very little else to do. My piano was at home, right? It was my mother's wedding gift to me to make sure that, I had that piano before me and I remember to play. So the piano was at home and I absolutely went back to it. And it was such a comfort going back and playing and re-remembering. I think I never forget a skill like music, but just re-remembering old pieces that I used to play. And now I'm not playing as much definitely as I used to during the pandemic. Those 2 years I really went back into it. I used to post music videos online, something I never did. I used to play. But now that is always there for me. So if I'm writing a lot, if I've had a session of writing, I'm tired, or I've done an online event or something, there's always the piano to break that stretch for you. I'm not going to call it writer's block or anything, but there are times you just need to divert your mind from going too deep into a story or research or whatever it is. And in those times for me, then there's the piano. So that is what it is now for me. I'm not doing it professionally. There is no, achievement or stress or anything related around that. It's my pure hobby. It's my comfort. It's my joy. That's music for me.
Yeah, that's good. Actually, music to me is like a healer. When you're in stress, you just put something on and listen to it. It could be anything. It could be, as you mentioned, jazz, blues, whatever you want.
Anything.
Of course. With this, I would like to conclude, but I would thank you, Nandita, for your time today and talking about books, sharing some of your memories with us. So thank you.
I don't even know the time. It was a lovely discussion and lovely flowing discussion. Great chatting with you.
Thank you, Nandita. Have a good day. Bye.
You too, Rishab. Thank you.